Welcome to VINTed with Scout Driscoll. Come along with me on my journey into the wine world, where I share thoughtful conversations with wine industry leaders. Get ready for marketing insights from branding and design to sales and social media, and the answer to the ultimate question: what moves wine? I'm Scout Driscoll, founder of VINTed Studio and host of VINTed, where I ask top leaders in the wine industry, how do you move wine? Past episodes include conversations on celebrating culture with Kim Lewis of Old Orleans Wines and with Kenny Lickapacone, owner of Hobo Wine Company out in Sonoma. You can check out those episodes and more on our website. On today's episode, we're chatting with Bryan Monteleone and Kyle Groth, founders of Drinkubator, all about digital marketing for wineries. But before we dive in, here's a quick word from our sponsor. This episode is brought to you by VINTed Wine Branding and Design, where rich storytelling meets smart design. At VINTed, our studio goes beyond the label, guiding wine brands through strategy-rich branding and packaging evolutions, websites, point of sale, and more. Our work with Cooper's Hawk has helped them grow the nation's largest wine club to over 540,000 members. You can learn more about VINTed at VINT.studio, and for a free label audit for your brand, email me at hello@vint.studio. I am so excited today to welcome Bryan Monteleone and Kyle Groth, co-founders of Drinkubator. Drinkubator leverages digital marketing to help wineries grow in so many ways. They work with folks in the spirits world, RTDs, wine, non-alcoholic beverages, and more. And they're helping clients with emerging technology and bleeding edge online tactics to help make better decisions on live data, based on live data, and with analytics. They're growing their footprint in the ever-growing and uber-competitive beverage industry by helping their clients grow as well. So Bryan and Kyle, welcome to the show.
How are you?
Be here.
Good. So I'm so excited to have you guys on the show today. I recently had the opportunity to connect with Bryan, and he and I were talking all about how wineries can leverage data, leverage tech. We're going to talk a little bit about geofencing, which blows my mind and creeps me out all at the same time. It's amazing. But I just really think you have so many great insights to share on the digital side of things for wineries who, to a certain extent, are often a little befuddled when it comes to even things like social media. So I would love for you guys to tell us all about all of your wizardy tricks about digital. And before we get started, I would love for you just to have us kick off by telling our listeners just a little bit more about Drinkubator and how you guys got started.
Sure. Yeah. So Kyle, I can jump in here. Drinkubator, like you mentioned, we exist to basically bridge the gap between digital strategy and technology and the alcohol industry. My background was in technology, so I worked with a lot of startups, worked with emerging tech companies, mostly in the sports and entertainment industry, and got introduced to the spirits industry almost 11 years ago through a technology. And as I was having conversations with craft makers, I realized really quickly that they were a little bit behind the times when it came to what was possible through digital and tech. Actually, they were a lot behind the times.
Yeah.
But a light bulb went off, and I thought, hey, here's an opportunity. So fast forward 3 years, I met Kyle. He can tell you more about himself, but he came from the spirits industry as well as technology. And so we formed Drinkubator almost 6 years ago, and have a suite of services and a team of experts that basically help artisan craft brands tell their story and carve out their piece of the pie in an industry that is super, super competitive, as we all know, but also super exciting and really very different from when I got introduced to it, 11 years ago. It's even different than it was, 2 years ago, thanks to that ugly thing called COVID. But that was good. In my mind, it kind of brought the industry up and opened the industry's eyes as to what is actually possible online. That's where we live. That's what we love. We're constantly trying to push the envelope as far as how we can leverage digital and even technologies that weren't even designed for the alcohol industry, right? Other CPG platforms that we can kind of tweak and partner with strategically to make it relevant for our brand and our brand partners.
Yeah, there's such a need there. And Kyle, how did you get into this whole world of digital?
Sure. Yeah. So I started on the brand side, as Bryan mentioned, really an early stage. So I had the opportunity of seeing and being a part of some brands from the ground up, like Angel's Envy Bourbon and Papa's Pilar Rum. And as in any startup, you wear a lot of hats. You figure out what actually drives the business, what's a motivator to these small to mid-sized spirits brands, and then really found a passion for that digital side. I was involved with an early stage tech accelerator out in Boulder, Colorado, and was able to really start working with some of those startups and being beta testers on some of our in-house brands, and really trying to figure out how do you outsmart rather than outspend the competition? Because in the spirits world, if you're a small to mid-sized brand, you don't have anywhere near the budget of the larger players out there.
Yeah.
And digital was just proving to be that strategy. There was very little in data collection, customer journey creation, really how to speak to your audience in a different way. And starting 12 years ago now, it's grown up a lot, and new technologies, e-commerce has emerged as a big leader. So it's been a lot of fun to really focus on that digital side, and then really partner with Bryan and grow the Drinkubator team to see how we can put our heads together and create these custom solutions for our clients.
Yeah. And I think, Bryan, when you mentioned the pandemic, you're so right. The pandemic was such a digital shock for the wine world in general. Living in a world where all of a sudden, people who had maybe 40% of their sales were from tasting rooms and wine club that people signed up for immediately when they walked in the door, there was a huge shift to DTC. I think it was like 16% growth in DTC in just the first few months of 2020 or something like that. So making sure that these wineries who are still not quite understanding the full robustness of digital services and how you can use the web to grow your winery is super, super important. It goes beyond just having a really good e-commerce, right? It goes beyond that. It's so much more about data and who is using it and how they're using it. So I know we're going to go through some, I like listeners, I decided that today we're going to play like a little game show. So we're going to get into some of the individual ways that people can use your services, but from a really high level, list out the things that you do for clients. Like what are like the 8 to 10 categories of service offerings you guys have?
For sure. Yeah. So it all kind of starts with, and I love the way you said that, like it's more than just D2C, right? That's a piece of the puzzle. Holistic digital strategy involves several different aspects, and it can be, pieced together as the brand's life cycle moves on, or it can be done all at once. But yeah, it's, the leading service I would say is paid social. No real surprise there. What we've seen is that Facebook and Instagram are still the leaders. A lot of brands are on Pinterest when it makes sense, primarily for like cocktails and recipes and awareness. And then TikTok is kind of something everybody's trying to figure out. But the thrust of our paid social services would be on Facebook and Instagram, and then obviously SEM is another major piece of that. Both branded search and non-branded search, so that you're competitive in the keywords that make sense for not only your industry but specifically for your brand. Email is incredibly important in this industry, and people oftentimes we'll talk to brands and we'll bring up email, and they'll kind of like, email, really? I thought that was so 2000.
Yeah.
But in this industry, it means everything. I mean, what we like to say is that a well-run digital strategy, your email campaigns should be driving 20 to 25% of your overall business. And that's primarily from repurchasers, right? I mean, that's where you really win in the spirits industry and in the wine industry, is when people buy the bottle, the juice is good, and they want to buy it again.
Yeah.
And then outside of that, we have a couple of, like I had mentioned, we work with kind of emerging technologies. And so we've got a couple strategic partnerships that we're super excited about. One of which is called Overwatch, which is that retail driven piece that we can talk about more, which really drives awareness and traffic to the retail segment. And then outside of that, we do programmatic advertising, linear media, if it makes sense for brands. But the primary core services are paid social, SEM, and then email.
Got it.
To add to that, I think one, to put you on the spot, Bryan, I think one that Bryan missed is data collection and experience inside of brand homes,
Of course, yeah.
Which is another partnership that we've been able to align ourselves with a leading platform out there, and really working with the brands on how do you capture data in your winery, and then what do you do with it? How do you segment it? And how do you create journeys outside of that to bring people back, get people engaged, and really create these ambassadors when they go home and leave your premise?
So smart. And I love how omni-channel it is. So often wineries think of one vertical in terms of marketing themselves, and that's their wine label. And they don't go beyond thinking the label. And so I love that you guys really are shedding light on the idea that you can have that strategy really be omni-channel, and you can take the same message and have it come to people in so many different ways and kind of surround them digitally with your brand, uh, which is super, super fun. So I know that a lot of wineries are often, pretty shy. The margins in wine are tight, and especially with supply chain issues and cost and inflation, they're getting even tighter. So what do you say to wineries and the spirits brands when you're talking about the ROI on what you do? How do we know that if I invest in, this paid digital advertising, or if I invest in this email strategy, that it's going to pay dividends?
Sure. I can take that one. I think from an ROI standpoint, there's certain strategies and platforms that are pretty straightforward. And so if it is purely let's drive D2C sales, there's a direct connection between spend and return on investment. Email is one that I think is most often forgot. And so and it's one that we coach a lot of brands on, is that collecting customer data, email and SMS, is the lowest hanging fruit by far. If you're a winery and you get 50,000, 100,000 folks to visit, and most wineries put tons of thought and have great experiences on site and tastings, and the customer just walks away blown away. It's really capturing that and then bringing it home with them and bringing them back to purchase, whether that be sending them to on-premise accounts, or sending them back online and offering special kind of online only releases. Those are the easy ways. I think some of our services as well that are harder to track directly to purchase is like our Overwatch campaign, where we are driving foot traffic to retailers. And then really and we've done this with a lot of brands, is figuring out what's the baseline of sales. And then over the course of 90, 120 days, how much lift have we actually attributed to over time? So there are ways to do it, but this industry is very well known for having a difficult time of collecting data and tracking directly to purchase. And that's what we're trying to bridge the gap on.
I love that. And the idea that you can actually have that metric is so incredible. I think from a design standpoint, so often, for any client of ours, there's so many different factors. Like we can make the world's best packaging, but if the wine is too sweet for most people's taste, they're not going to buy it. So it's hard to kind of have that official, like, this is the exact, needle movement based on what we did. But with you guys, you really get that data live, and you have the ability to judge that. And I know, at one point, Bryan, you were even talking about how you can even leverage that data. This is in our previous conversation about how you could leverage that data to make marketing decisions and decide exactly who your target audience is, decide exactly, what message or photo style or color or, what is best performing. And so I really think that some of that return on investment comes from just the insights that you gain from trying things over and over again and really refining that through boots on the ground marketing and seeing how it works out.
Yeah, I think one of the most fun and rewarding parts of what we do is when, oftentimes when we engage with a brand, they tell us who their customer is, what they look like, how much they make, where they live, all that good stuff. And that's kind of where we start, right? And then I would say 50 to 60% of the time, 30, 45 days later, we're telling them, actually, this is who it is. This is where they live. This is where, and I think that's two things. I think number one, most of the brands that we start working with, they might have a little bit of data, but not a very deep dive into, who the personas really are. Or they've done an exercise with an awesome marketing group to figure out their archetypes and gone through that exercise. But so I think on the one hand, it's what they know and what they've been able to uncover. But then on the other side, I think there's different buyers online. I think an online shopper is a very different shopper than someone who goes to the local liquor store and looks at labels and chooses what they want to drink that weekend. So there's a couple factors that play into that. But yeah, the data, we've helped so many brands make good decisions, not only about where they should get distribution, but where they should invest boots on the street, right? Because a lot of brands say, well, we're a nautical brand, so we should be all on the coastlines. But lo and behold, you may have a huge audience in Moab that you never would have considered, but you're killing it in Moab. So you should invest in Moab. And those are the kinds of insights that we kind of geek out on and love to share with our clients, to just kind of help them understand better who really is their buyer, and how can they speak more contextually to them, and then helping them to speak to them through all of these different potential platforms.
Yeah. Or to even identify who they're not reaching so they can start focusing on that. You know, like
Exactly.
what is the opportunity in terms of those gaps in your current purchasers, so you can say, okay, we've got this demo covered, but we really want to start talking to 35-year-old moms or whatever.
Mhm.
Um, awesome. So I want to talk also about, what are some of the mistakes that you see wineries making in their digital marketing? And I can appreciate if you don't want to name names, but what are some things that you guys that you, if you're like, oh, I just wish everyone would stop doing that, or I wish everyone would start doing this. What are some things that as experts you guys see in the marketing landscape?
I can start with that one.
Mhm.
I think from what I see from a lot of the brands that we talk to, I think they see digital marketing and assume social media. Assume, hey, right, we have social media, we have it covered, we have a social calendar. I think the mistake they make is not thinking through just how much of an experience you can create through digital marketing, and how you can actually bring the experience that you put into your winery home, and having that omni-channel solution, right? It's not just, hey, we're going to just run Instagram ads and we're set, right? We can do that, and we create a customer journey that educates brands, or hits them post visit and sends them to retail. But it's really using all of the channels at your disposal, that really don't cost that much, especially when it comes to email. And customer segmentation is huge as well. I think that's a big miss, is not lumping all of your consumers into one bucket, is making sure you're hitting the right consumer with the right content at the right time, that really engages them and gets them more and more ingrained into your brand.
And so that's something that you guys do. You kind of help do those segmentation breakdowns and develop marketing messages or strategies to connect with each one.
Yeah, absolutely. So we do that, not only from the consumers that we bring in to the website, and collect their data kind of in platform, whether it be on Facebook or on the site pop up or post purchase online, but then also like winery data. So with some of our solutions, we can capture who's going to your winery, where are they coming from, what time of day are they booking, what day of the week are they booking, and just have more educated decisions on here's when and where we should spend our money, to get the most return on investment.
Got it.
Yeah, I think that's another call out, is content and monetizing content, right? So a lot of the brands we work with have beautiful content. They've invested in content, but they don't necessarily know how to distribute it, and they distribute it to everybody and assume that it's going to resonate with everybody who's ever touched their brand in any way, any shape or form. And to build on what Kyle was mentioning there, like, the more you can segment, the more buckets you can fill of potential customers, then you know more about them. And this is marketing 101, right? You need to speak to people in a way that they're going to receive it, and in the context that makes sense for them. So if they're on, if they're on social media versus at the winery, those should be different messages, right? You should speak to that person differently because they're a different potential customer. So just leveraging content in a way, in an omni-channel holistic strategy, where this piece of content fits in this bucket, this one fits in this bucket, this one fits in this bucket, as opposed to, let's just push our content out to everybody
Yeah.
because everybody's going to love
Here comes Mother's Day.
it.
Right.
Yeah, yeah, good
It's
example.
National Pizza Day. We're going to tell everyone about Pizza Day, even though we sell rosé. Like,
Right.
Exactly.
yeah, I think it's so important to make sure people have that fine-tuned message. And I think I'm even guilty of that a little bit, where you just have so much to handle already. And I feel like especially smaller, more independent wineries are so busy wearing so many hats and juggling so many different things at once, that like they're happy if they just get something on Instagram, or if they're able to post something on LinkedIn about their brand. So to have help developing that full omni-channel marketing campaign in a way that ties into the data appropriately and like leverages all the technology and all of those things are so incredibly helpful. Is there just, I was curious, is there a certain size of client that you tend to work with? Like in the lifespan of a business, is there a certain sweet spot for you, or do you work with startups? Do you work with end ups? Everything in between?
Yeah. So we kind of, when it was just Kyle and myself, we cut our teeth on anybody who we could get, right. And fortunately, we had some brands that we were already close to through Kyle's past that we were able to start with. But what we learned is that we can run digital strategy on any budget, right? And we could run a paid social campaign on a smaller budget. But ultimately, what we learned is that in order to do it well and in order to get results and to actually be able to optimize, not to use a buzzword, but optimization is everything.
Mm-hmm.
And so the more learnings we can get back and the faster we can get those learnings, the better we can optimize, the better return we can get. And so typically, to answer your question, we're looking for brands that want to get to the hockey stick that everybody wants to reach in a quicker way. So in other words, instead of spending $15,000 over 6 months to get there, we would encourage them, or we work with brands that are able to spend $15,000 in 2 months and then get fully optimized. And then that return comes much quicker. So that 15,000 oftentimes turns into 25, turns into 30. And we're killing it from a perspective of all funnels, right? Top funnel, middle funnel, bottom funnel, conversions, purchases, awareness. And clients don't get frustrated, because what we saw early on is that we would get results, but it was a slow burn, and it took a long time. And so clients were like, man, we've been doing this for 6 months, but we haven't really seen a lot. And that was only because in the digital game, it's all about throwing stuff against the wall, seeing what sticks, and optimizing against what does, turning off what doesn't. And the sooner you can do that, the faster you're going to be, off to the races with successful campaigns.
Yeah. Don't they call it seasoning the pixel or something?
Exactly.
We're like, yeah. So if you don't spend that money to get eyeballs on your ads, you're not going to get the data to correctly change your ads to be even better for that one person who's really going to respond to it and actually click on it. That makes a lot of sense to me. And I've definitely had that experience before with some digital marketing for our clients where, you really can spend a little bit all the time, but you're super penny wise and pound foolish if you can't just like really scale quickly and then get that return on investment, because it won't happen without that initial investment. You might as well not do it.
We'll see some hesitancy because it is new to most brands, right? And so a lot of times we'll say, let's take the first, right? Let's take 90 days, give us a 90-day test and some budget to play with. And if we're able to basically create our own budget, right? If we can become ROI positive and add cash to your bank rather than deplete it, let's tack that on the next 30 days and continue to scale it that way. So that's a lot of how we work with some of the brands that can show some upfront commitment. We can show learnings, and then we can create our own budget as long as we're making money for them.
Yeah. And just looking at the case studies on your website, it seems like that's been really successful for you guys. And it's really, the proof is in the pudding to say.
Yeah. And I should mention that that doesn't mean that there aren't brands that are coming out of the ground that aren't capable of spending that kind of money. It's just we don't want to frustrate our team, or especially not our clients, by dipping our toe. I mean, going all in on digital strategy 99% of the time pays off. And in all the ways that we've talked about, right? Making better decisions, getting better analytics, knowing your customer better, knowing how to contextually speak to them and on which platform to speak to them in. So that's kind of the client that we like to work with, is one that sees the overall broader picture, as opposed to how many bottles did I sell last week,
Yeah. And I like that you're not just talking DTC, like to a big extent that's retail as well. And for clients that want to kind of begin to check the boxes and all those ways of selling on-premise, off-premise, DTC, you have the ability to really see results in all of those categories, which I think is really, really helpful and helps move the needle.
Yeah. And I think that probably most accurately answers your question on what kind of brands we work with. And it's really brands that utilize us across the board, right? Not just online. It's really tough to build an online only brand, and it's very tough to separate what you're doing online with what you're doing off and in the market. And so what we look for is brands that are going to leverage not only our D2C capabilities, but also our ability to tack on what we do to your sales team or kind of your feet on the street and amplify your tasting events, draw consumer awareness or drive consumer awareness so that when customers walk in the store or the bar or the restaurant and they see your name on the menu or your label, they know your brand already and they're more likely to pull it off the shelf.
Yeah, for sure. All right, we're going to move into playing a game where you guys give one piece of advice for a couple of your service categories I feel are really relevant to wineries. So we're going to call it, how the hell do I leverage that? So I know we've touched on some of these already, but let's talk about paid social. How can a winery leverage paid social?
Sure. So am I limited to just one piece of advice?
I think maybe let's make it a story. Like, okay, so I own a winery. I produce 30,000 cases a year. I'm mostly distributed, into retail, a couple restaurants here and there, a little bit of wine club. Like, what do I do with paid social?
Sure. I think from our standpoint, the way we look at paid social, especially for wineries, is twofold: is building really a full funnel approach. So making sure you're not just focused on ads that are driving strictly purchases, but also targeting all of your markets that you're distributed in and zip codes and driving awareness in those zip codes, and then really heavying up in the markets that you want to focus on, whether that be Northern California or Dallas or Miami, and say these are the markets that we're going to have always on heavy up budgets to drive consumer awareness at a very hyper targeted level to get in front of your consumers and drive that. And then I think one area that most brands miss is post-purchase journeys. So when we can identify folks who have gone to your winery or purchased online, or we can track them to retail to a purchase, is creating journeys after that purchase for your brand, showing them more the lifestyle and more about your brand, the process, driving them to actually drink the bottle or deplete the bottle on Thursdays, Fridays, Saturday campaigns, and hitting consumers that way. So I'd say not forgetting about them once they do purchase.
Smart, very smart. All right, Google keywords and campaigns, search engine marketing. How the hell does a winery leverage that?
Yeah. So there's two key pieces to SEM. There's branded search and there's non-branded search, right? So leveraging Google it's a big job. There's a lot of competition, but where we usually focus is on branded and non-branded keywords. Branded means they're familiar with your brand, they're looking for it, they're trying to find out more about your story or where they can purchase it. And then non-branded is they may not know your brand yet, but they know what they like, and so they're searching terms that are affinities with your brand. And so those are the two ways from a search standpoint. And then obviously display ads. Again, that requires some data so that you're serving up the ads in the right places. But once we know that people who drink your wine also like whatever the latest TV show is, or a certain celebrity, or a certain kind of accessory, then that's where Google and the tools that are available to us can really kick off, because now we can start honing in on those audiences and where those audiences are. And then the other side of SEM is YouTube. And if you're a brand that has beautiful content like a lot of these wineries do, putting that out there and telling your story of sustainability or your sourcing or your grapes or whatever that is, or having your sommelier or your whoever's actually in the weeds on making your product, telling that story on a YouTube channel pays dividends, and is a great way to reach more eyeballs, and start people down the journey to becoming purchasers of the brand.
Awesome. How about geofencing, which is one that blows my mind, and I still don't quite understand. How the hell does a winery leverage geofencing, and what is it? Let's explain that a little bit too.
So geofencing is just the ability to basically identify an area. Let's say it's the room I'm sitting in, encircle it, and then identify any devices that enter that. And then take those devices and be able to match them to actual people anonymously. So we don't know exactly who it is, but we can match them across platforms and then show different ads or track them elsewhere. I'd say geofencing, there's two ways of using it. One, there's live geofencing. So people who are currently in a space like an event or a festival or a trade conference. And then the other one is one that we utilize heavily as well, is having a look back, is being able to go to a winery and say, all right, give us all of your top 100 accounts out there. We'll geofence inside those premises, identify consumers that are regular shoppers there, segment those with wine shoppers, and then show awareness campaigns and drive your brand awareness to customers that we know shop at your locations. So there's super creative ways of using geofencing. That's probably the most common and the most simplistic. But then it's also, I mean, there's really sneaky ways of using it in terms of you can geofence competitive wineries, you can geofence festivals, you can geofence golf courses if that's your customer. And really, the world's your oyster when it comes to being able to track devices in terms of how creative can we get with who's your consumer, where are they, and how do we drive meaningful engagement?
Wow. I'm going to burn my phone. Just kidding.
Exactly.
No, but I honestly, like, I would rather be served ads that are relevant to me. Like, I'm going to get ads as my exchange for using social media. Like, I understand I'm going to be advertised to. It's the cost I pay. And I'd rather have ones that I can actually relate to and I care about, and not, things that aren't really important to me as a person. So I don't find it that creepy. But I also think it's incredible that a winery could target a specific target in a specific town, in the wine department, or like you could really, get that fine tuned with geofencing. And it's incredible that you can go through and then add those people to your sales funnel and start retargeting them or targeting them to pick up your stuff in person. So it's not just a DTC thing. It's not just go on our website and buy the wine. It's next time you're there, remember to buy it,
Exactly.
which is so smart. All right. And our last category I have is email. How the hell do wineries leverage email? I feel like every winery uses it. I get a ton of winery emails. I think they begin to kind of like run out of things to say. They email so often. That's why you get like, but don't forget to pick up rosé for Mother's Day. But how do you guys recommend leveraging email? I know you touched a little bit on segmentation earlier, so I'm assuming that's part of your answer. But how do we leverage email?
So I think when a lot of, and Kyle, you can add to this if I don't catch everything, because there's a lot to email. But I think when brands think of email, they think of email blasts, right? Or they think of newsletters. And that's definitely a viable piece of email campaigns and email management, but that's definitely not the only piece. And oftentimes it's not the biggest piece. So when we say email, we mean not only the email promotional messages that go out each month, maybe multiple times a month, depending on, like you said, Mother's Day or other holidays or a new release or, an informative video about, again, the brand story, but also automations and flows. And so automations and flows is when you capture an email from someone and then you follow up with them, right? So if someone hits your website and they browse, they submit their email, but they don't purchase. Well, now you can create a flow to hit them a day later, 3 days after that, to remind them to go back and purchase. Or if they add to cart but they don't check out, same thing. You create a flow for that. And there's a number of ways that you can build flows and automations to essentially pull people back to the brand in a way that, again, is contextual, because we know what their behavior was to get them into that flow. And so now we can speak to them in a way that makes sense, because we know, okay, they hit the website but they didn't purchase, they added to cart, or they purchased, and after they purchase, it's going to take a couple of days for the product to get to their doorstep. So get them excited about how they can use it, what they can pair it with, things like that. So email is more than just what people think when we say email. It's a whole lot more, and even you could throw SMS in there as well.
That all that retargeting. Yeah. That come back and buy more moments where you can really knock on someone's door everywhere and say, hey guys, come on back. Time to reorder.
And I think to add to that is customer data. The more you can collect on customers, especially ones who have purchased at your winery or online, and being able to know what their taste profile, what their preferences are. That way, if you're selling rosé for Mother's Day, it's going out to a rosé audience or one that is likely to buy.
Mm-hmm.
And as Bryan said, really, I think most wineries do a really good job of the one-off sends and seasonal updates and newsletters. I think it is building out those automations, whether it's post-visit, post-purchase, abandoned cart flows, like all of those automations that just are always on, whether you're sleeping or awake, that continue to drive folks back.
Yeah, and I love how automated it is. It's set it up once and it's done to a certain extent.
Exactly.
And it's more tailored to people's needs. It's not just hitting them with, increasingly desperate, what do we talk about now, emails. It's really focused on what they need, and you're serving people in a way that they're more likely to purchase.
Exactly.
Thank you for playing my game. That was fun. So my final question, I know we've touched on a lot already, but what is your single best advice for moving wine and increasing sales? Drum roll.
Yeah. I mean, I guess for
hire
me,
us. No.
Yeah.
Hire Drinkubator.
Well, for me, I guess, the answer is be smart. And I think being smart means be in the now, right? Don't continue to do things the way wineries have done things for generations and for the last, even decades, because it's a different place. The world's a different place. And to reach people these days, you've got to think digital. You've got to think of how consumers behave. It's a microwave society. You get 2 seconds, to make an impression. So make those impressions count. Make those impressions come at the time and the place where it makes sense, and make sure you're again serving up and speaking to the potential consumer in a way that they're open to and that is relevant for the world that we live in today. So, when I speak to wineries or brands or spirits and they still haven't kind of crossed that threshold of digital and put that at the forefront, it's okay. It's their prerogative, but to me, it's just crazy. I mean, in order to be a smart marketer today, you have to have a digital footprint. And like Kyle said earlier, it doesn't mean you just have organic social going on.
Yeah.
It means you're actively working and investing in digital in a way that is meaningful, and that's going to pay huge dividends in the long run in all the ways that we've talked about, right? How you make decisions about essentially everything that you're doing as a winery. So it's a long-winded way to say be smart, but yeah, just be smart.
I love that. And I think, so often people, they don't realize how much money they're leaving on the table with a little bit of effort, or just if you do a couple things a little more right, over time, you really are leaving money on the table if you don't execute on those. And I think digital is something that is so relevant for wineries. Kyle, did you have anything to add to that?
No, I think one piece of advice I would give is to put yourself in the consumer's shoes, and don't forget about what they should be getting out of the equation as well. I think a lot of brands think of, what are we getting out of this? How do we drive purchase? But I think to flip that is, what are you giving the consumer, right? How are you adding to their life and what you're doing, whether offline or on? And when it comes to online, it's when you're creating these loyalty programs and you're creating these experiences online, making sure you're adding to their lifestyle or adding some sort of benefit, whether it be Spotify playlists that cater to your brand and embrace the lifestyle you have. But just those little things go a really long way with consumers, so that they know it's not just a one-way transaction.
Yeah. Wonderful advice. Awesome. So we've been talking today with Bryan Monteleone and Kyle Groth, co-founders of Drinkubator. Guys, where can people learn more about Drinkubator and connect with you?
Drinkubator.com. Probably the best place. We actually we were the classic example of a tech company that didn't invest in their own tech for until basically 4 months ago.
Really?
And then we actually put up a website that made us look like we actually knew what we were doing.
I love your website. I love it so much. Everyone should go check it out. I was just talking to another service-based business, and I was like, go look at Drinkubator. So good choice. As a, design and branding expert, I highly recommend you do that. So Drinkubator.com. Are you guys on LinkedIn at all? Can folks connect with you there?
For sure. Yeah. Drinkubator on LinkedIn as well. And then our email is really easy. It's just Bryan with a Y at Drinkubator.com, and Kyle also with a Y at Drinkubator.com.
Is it DRYNK Cubator? Just
no.
Awesome. All right, guys. Well, that's all for this week's episode of VINTed. As always, you can head over to vint.studio to sign up to our email list, as well as check out all the links and resources in the show notes. And if you enjoyed this episode and you'd like to help support the podcast, please share it with others, post about it on social media, or leave a rating and review. You can catch all the latest from me and following me on Instagram at Scout Driscoll and on LinkedIn. So thanks again for listening, everyone, and we'll see you on the next episode of VINTed. Tune in for the next VINTed. Subscribe today. For future episodes, marketing advice, and more, follow me on Instagram at Scout Driscoll. Learn more about VINT's design and branding services for wineries at www.vint.studio.